This is the latest hearing of the Blowing Rock Board of Adjustment. My name is E.B. Springs. Down here we have Jerry Starnes, Mr. Stephen Schiller, Dr. Lee Rockamore, and Ms. Sarah Murphy will be the board today. We have a new alternate who was appointed, but he's not going to be serving tonight. He's going to be observing, Mr. Larry Armour. He needs to get sworn in tonight. And maybe that's a good way to start this evening. Madam Clerk, let's swear in Mr. Armour.
Because is this considered the last meeting of last year, the first meeting of this year? Because if it's the first meeting, doesn't it get sworn in to elect our chairman and vice chairman? Or do we just continue?
I don't, as long as you're, you've got a term, so you can go into your next term.
Faithfully discharge the duties to which I have been entrusted as a member of the Board of Adjustment on this day, January 24th of 2024.
And it's a little bit of an open question as to whether we need to get sworn in for every term. I think the better practice is to let's go to approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was August 24th, 2023. We've received a copy of the minutes from our clerk, Ms. Miller. Does any board member see anything that needs to be corrected, added, or changed?
I have some things.
Mr. Schiller.
Can you have, like, you can bring up the page, like, start with page 2, section 1, the variance. I mean, do you want to change these to your document now, or just have me give you a list?
You can just give me a list out of the document with me right now.
Okay. So then I can just.
You do need to articulate it.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, because somebody else might have another.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Thing. All right. Page 2, section 1, variance number 2023, the third paragraph says Chairman Springs stated that the hearing is a quasi-judicial hearing. It is conducted according to the rules and laws pertaining to quasi-judicial hearings. There's no S there. Page 3, second paragraph, Chairman Springs stated that to be transparent, we need to let everyone know that Mr. Stephen Schiller, just an extra E in there. And then the next paragraph, Chairman Springs asked Mr. Parks and the Sleemans, and I think the apostrophe would be after the S on Sleemans, is they have any objections to Mr. Schiller participating in the hearing. And then I think we need to add no one objected, because it doesn't say that there.
Yes.
Go down further to the paragraph where there's a bolded all members in favor, vote was unanimous. And then after that, it says, Mr. Parks and the Sleemans object the standing of the other party. So I'm not sure what's supposed to be there, but that doesn't sound right. Object. Do not object to the standing of the other party.
I'm trying to recall if they did object to the next door neighbor. Does anyone recall?
I wasn't at that meeting.
I wasn't there either. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the details of that. Were the next door neighbors here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
According to the record.
Yeah, I don't think they objected, but I'm not positive.
I can't recall.
It's just the wording is just.
Did you type this from the tape?
Correct.
Okay,
All
so
right,
you need to look at that.
let's trust.
I was from the tape as well as my own notes. I could have misinterpreted what was said on the tape though. I can double check it just to be sure.
Okay.
So you think the neighbors, nobody objected to the neighbors being here?
I don't see how
Yeah,
they
stay
had every
there.
right to be here.
Yeah.
I don't know why they.
Let's leave that the way it is.
I'll make sure to check.
Okay, and then third paragraph from the bottom of page 3, Chairman Springs asked Mr. Parks, Mr. and Mrs. Sleeman, object. If I would think we need to say if they object to Mr. Walker
Sure.
on the being on the board after knowing him, and then Mr. Miller would have a small R instead of a capital R in Mr.
Okay.
fourth page, third paragraph, second to last sentence. Mr. Johnson said it came to the word "the" is not in there, to the staff's attention about a week or so ago. Very minor.
Okay.
Page 5, sixth paragraph. Chairman Springs asked to make Mr. Johnson's, and he needs an apostrophe in there, apostrophe S, Mr. Johnson's staff report, a part of the record.
Where was it on the page?
Well, you printed that out awfully small. See it?
Yes.
Okay. And then 2 more paragraphs down, Chairman Springs asked, we need to insert the word asked, if he was contacted by any of the property owners the notice was sent to. I guess, and he was Mr. Johnson. If he was contacted by any of the property owners the notice was sent to, Mr. Johnson said we heard from 2 different people.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see, go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more paragraphs. Chairman Springs asked if we ran any public notices in the newspaper. Mr. Johnson said, yes, we ran it in, and there's an extra I there. Next paragraph, Chairman Springs advised, we could now hear from Mr. Parks. So Parks needs a capital P. Is that how you want? Chairman Springs advised we could now hear. Okay, yeah, so Mr. Parks just needs a P.
Okay.
Page 6, third paragraph. Mr. Miller asked how big the house is. Mr. Parks said, he said it. We don't need the word he. Mr. Parks said he does not have that information. Mrs. Sleeman said around 6,000 feet. Mr. Miller said that instead of if. The tax office states the house is 6,302 square feet. Is that right? Mr. Parks said yes. And then Mr. Miller, capital M. And that's it on page 6.
Okay.
Page 7, fifth paragraph. Mr. Sleeman asked, it says asked or the board. I think it just asked the board. Take out the word or. Next paragraph, Mr. Miller asked Mr. Sleeman to confirm the size of his lot being 150 feet by 14 feet. I think that's probably 140, but I'm not sure. But it's not 14. And Mr. Sleeman said yes. Let's see. Page 8. Fourth paragraph, last sentence, Mr. Parks said he was the one who tied the string, and then we want the word but, it just says BU. So, but the surveyor put the white stakes in. Page 9, last paragraph, last sentence, second to last sentence. If you were 5 feet off the property line, you could continue expansion the rest of the property off the 5-foot property line. So I think this should be, if you were 5 feet off the property line, you could continue the expansion for the rest of the property off the 5-foot property line until you ran into another setback. All right, page 12. B, Mr. Prescott Little Jr., the next door neighbor, testified as to why he felt there's just an extra space in there. I don't need to go through the extra spaces. 17 on the same page, 12, unique features of this property include A, most of the house is sited diagonal. So I thought diagonally would be better, diagonally from the street front. Let's see. And then page 13, conclusions of law. 2, based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment does not find substantial material and competent evidence exists. So I think maybe that substantial material and competent evidence exists. Does not find that substantial material and competent evidence exists.
Right.
Just insert that. That substantial material and competent evidence. Yeah, I
think you can say does
Okay.
not find substantial material.
Okay.
I think that's the way I would have said it.
Okay, we'll leave it then. That's it.
I have one addition, and unfortunately, I did not number pages. It's right above when Mr. Chairman Springs asked if the house meets the setback requirements. The paragraph before that, Mr. Sleeman said that there was a house there, and it's spelled T-H-E-I-R instead of T-H-E-R-E.
Give us a landmark so we can find it.
Do we need to move to accept these changes?
Yes, in just a second.
I would so move.
Wait until we're done.
Oh,
It might have
Lee's
more.
Lee's got one. I'm trying to find it there.
This is, I didn't know, because I wasn't here, I didn't know we had it standing there. It's just,
It's a typo. Let's let it go, because if you said it, articulate it, still be the same. All right, do I have a motion to accept the amendments to the minutes? I make that motion. Is there a second?
second.
There's a second. Anyone else have any changes or objections to the minutes? All those in favor of accepting the minutes with the amendments made by Mr. Schiller, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There are none, so those minutes are adopted. We are supposed to swear in a chairman and vice chairman at the first meeting of every year. We had one and only one meeting last year. It was in August, and we elected a chairman and vice chairman at that meeting. It's a new year. We need to elect a chairman and vice chairman again. Do I have any nominations for chairman?
I'd like to nominate E.B. Springs as chairman.
I'll second it.
Any other nominations for chairman? All those in favor of electing E.B. Springs as chairman, say aye.
Aye.
I will now hear nominations for vice chairman. I nominate Mr. Stephen Schiller to be vice chairman.
I second that motion, if I'm allowed to.
Any other nominations for vice chairman?
Close the nominations.
All right, the nominations are closed. All those in favor of making Mr. Stephen Schiller the vice chairman, say aye. Aye. It's unanimous, so we'll move on. We have a couple of business matters, and I'll be brief. The first is, I wanted to talk about how the UNC School of Government defines unnecessary hardship, because it's hard. I've been doing this 8 years. It's still hard to get my arms around it. I have shared with the board members copies of the pages of the UNC Institute of Government's Handbook for Boards of Adjustment, pages 70 and 71.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I think that may have been the second item of agenda. Do we need to amend the agenda?
No, I think we can just keep going and kind of
Okay.
fix it as we go. This is under business, and we don't label anything new or old business. It's just business.
Okay.
But to try to get our arms around a workable definition of unnecessary hardship, and I'm reading from the UNC Institute of Government's book, School of Government, UNC School of Government. To get a variance, you have to show unnecessary hardship. The applicant does. Reading from the book, all regulation involves some level of necessary hardship and inconvenience shared by the entire community. To apply for a variance, an applicant must show that the hardship is unnecessary. There's no simple answer to calculating what constitutes unnecessary hardship. It is determined on a case-by-case basis. The Board of Adjustment holds a quasi-judicial hearing, considers the evidence presented, and uses its judgment to make the determination. The hardship must be more than a mere inconvenience to the property owner. So, for example, a simple preference for a lenient height restriction is not enough, nor is it enough for an applicant to claim that complying with the development will cost more money. The applicant must show that the nature of the hardship is far greater for the applicant than for others subject to the same restriction. So if someone was wanted a variance for a lot line setback, that person would have to show that the hardship for them with the setback where it is, set by the rules, is far greater for him than for others subject to the same restriction. I think I would kind of call it excessive hardship. Maybe you could think of it that way. Continuing. The unnecessary hardship must be peculiar to the property, not general to the neighborhood or the public. Such peculiar characteristics might arise, for example, from location on the property, size or shape of the lot, or topography or other natural features on the site. A variance is not the appropriate remedy for a condition or hardship that is shared by the neighborhood or the public as a whole. Such as it is, that's what the UNC School of Government gives us as their definition of unnecessary hardship. Does anyone have any comment to make? All right, moving on. I wanted to touch on something else. At our last meeting, the one where we just talked about the minutes, it came up that there are a couple of places in our Blowing Rock Town Code ordinances that say that an existing nonconformity cannot be enlarged. And I passed out a handout, and on page A of the handout, you'll see down at item F, it says the variance will neither result in the extension of a non-conforming situation in violation of Article 8, nor authorize the initiation of a non-conforming use of land. In that hearing, the Slamans were required to get their variance to prove 4 factors. They lost on all 4 factors. One of the factors, the last, which includes the word justice, which is almost a catch-all for these hearings, we said that because they wanted to enlarge an already non-conforming situation, add on to a grandfathered house, we said you couldn't do that because of the Blowing Rock statutes. Our interim town manager, Mr. Rothrock, was here. He said he thought actually we could authorize, if they met the required 4 factors, he felt like that we could authorize an enlargement of a non-conforming situation. We heard him, but we thought otherwise, and included that as one reason why the Slamans did not get their variance, and that was in item 4 under justice. Justice includes a number of different things. It includes breaking a law you can't break. It includes damaging and hurting the neighbor's property to the extent that you should not get the variance. It includes a number of things. The Slamans were not going to get their variance otherwise, but it turns out, after I did some research after the hearing, that we were wrong. If you'll look at item C of the handout, this is from the North Carolina General Statutes, Statute 160D-705D, and it's North Carolina gives the towns and cities in this state the authority to have zoning laws by North Carolina statute. And this particular statute describes what's necessary for variances in this state, and gives the 4 factors that are required to win a variance in this state. And it also starts out with the introduction that variances, when unnecessary hardships would result from carrying out the strict letter of a zoning regulation, the Board of Adjustment shall vary any of the provisions of the zoning regulation upon a showing of all the following. I saw that and I said, well, of course, we're talking about zoning regulations, even though it's non-conforming, and because the state general statutes trump the local ordinances, I felt like we were probably wrong in that instance, and we did have the authority to give a variance that enlarged an already existing non-conforming situation. I asked our zoning, planning and zoning director, Mr. Johnson, to ask the town attorney for his opinion, and he agreed. He believed that the North Carolina general statute trumped the Blowing Rock town code ordinances, and that if all four factors were met, we could in fact allow a non-conforming situation, or an existing non-conforming situation, to be enlarged, to be increased. But they would again have to show all the factors to win that variance. Does anyone have any comment on that? All right.
Well, it doesn't change the outcome because it didn't pass any of the four tests.
No, it doesn't. But we made a mistake. Again, they would not have gotten the variance anyway because of the other factors they didn't meet. But we all need to know that yes, we do have the authority, if they've met all four factors, to grant a variance of enlargement of an already non-conforming situation. We all need to know that. Just real quick, on A of the handout, page A, if you look down, this is in ordinance 16-5.2, which is where Blowing Rock lays out the four factors. And under D, where it says the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulations, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice achieved, it continues with something that's in the state statute. Blowing Rock continues with something that's not in the state statute. It says substantial justice is not achieved when granting the variance would be injurious to the neighborhood or to the general welfare. Towns and cities can add what they believe will be helpful or instructive verbiage to their ordinances, and so long as they don't conflict with state law, it's fine. It's helpful to boards like this, and they're allowed to do it. Blowing Rock does that very little. There's very little helpful verbiage in our town code. There are just a few places. I wish there was more. This is helpful verbiage for us. The substantial justice is not achieved when granting the variance would be injurious to the neighborhood or to the general welfare. I wanted to point that out to you because we can consider that certainly as we evaluate the fourth factor. Does anyone have any comment on that? All right. Let's move on to our variance application for tonight. And this is going to be case number, variance number 2023-02. The applicant is Amanda Waters with 444. Is Amanda Waters here? Ms. Waters, good evening. And it's done on behalf of Matt and Jenny Martella. And this is Mr. Martella on the end here. And we have another gentleman from 444. And introduce yourself, please.
My name's Kevin Short.
Okay. That's Troyel.
Correct.
Very good. Mr. Troy, are you going to present the facts for the Martellas, or is Ms.
It'll be a combination of Mr. Martella and myself.
Okay, all right. our minutes are going to be kept by Ms. Taylor Miller here, who is a town employee. The town is a party to this, and the town's represented by the planning director, Mr. Brian Johnson. The town is allowed to take a position on this variance request and oppose it if they see fit and have reason to. It's been my experience that the town doesn't take a position on these. It lays out the facts very dispassionately and steps back and lets the chips fall where they will. But our clerk, keeping the minutes, works for Mr. Johnson and is a town employee. So I'm going to ask the applicant, I'm going to ask Mr. Troy, Ms. Waters, and Mr. Martello, do you object to Ms. Miller keeping the minutes? Any objection? Mr. Johnson, do you object to your assistant keeping the minutes?
No, sir.
Okay. The courts want us to tell you what the standards and procedures are that we're going to use in this hearing, and I'll tell you that now. This hearing is a quasi-judicial hearing. It is conducted according to the rules and laws pertaining to quasi-judicial hearings. It will have all of the essential elements of a fair trial. Parties will have the opportunity to give evidence, cross-examine witnesses, inspect documents, and testimony shall be under oath. The board's findings will be based upon substantial, material, and competent evidence. Now, I'm going to ask if any board member has gone by the property in question here, which appears to be 442 Dogwood Lane in Blowing Rock. Board members, we are allowed to go by the property and see it. Has anyone gone by the property? And all 5 members have gone by the property. We are not allowed to have any ex parte communication about the facts or the merits of this case. Has any board, prior to coming into this room tonight, has any board member had any ex parte communications prior to this hearing on the facts or merits of the case?
No.
And all 5 board members say no, they have not. Does any board member have a conflict of evidence, conflict of interest, such that the board member has a financial interest in the outcome of this hearing, or is related to one of the parties to this hearing, or has a bias against one of the parties to this hearing? Does anyone have a problem in those regards?
No.
And all 4 board members say no, they do not. I'm going to ask if there is anyone here who considers themselves, other than the applicant and the property owner and the town representative, is there anyone else who considers themselves to have standing in this matter, such that if the case didn't go the correct way, that person would suffer special damages? Does anyone feel like they have standing to enter into this case and act as a party? And there is no response. Mr. Johnson, are we being shown on Zoom at this time?
We are.
Okay, is it live out there? Okay, all right. And it's been our practice to swear all of the witnesses at one time. It's more expedient. So anyone that's going to be a witness and speak, please come on over here to Ms. Miller and be sworn in. Ms. Waters, are you going to speak? Okay.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give to this body in this matter being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, I, as a board member, received the town's staff report, which lays out the town's understanding of what's being requested, and it included some pictures and drawings. Did all board members receive the staff report from the town?
Yes.
Everyone says yes. Mr. Troyer, and Mr. Martello, did you receive copies of the staff report? Okay. And, okay, we'll go ahead and hear from the, yeah, we will. Once we get him going. Everyone has received the staff report in advance of this hearing. And at this point, we will have the town representative lay out their understanding of what the applicant wants to do.
Are
Mr.
y'all,
Johnson,
are y'all okay with me staying here so I can run the?
just so you keep your voice up so we can hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we have before us variance case number 2023-02. Applicant Amanda Waters with 444 on behalf of Matt and Jenny Martella is requesting a setback variance from Land Use Ordinance Section 16-12.4. That's in reference to the R15 street setback. And the purpose of the request is to propose to construct a second story along with 2 additional decks on the rear of the property. For the record, the property is located at 442 Dogwood Road, further identified by Caldwell County PIN number, as this property is in Blowing Rock, but it is in Caldwell County as well. PIN number 2807-93-3632-000. Again, it is owned R15 single family.
Can you lay out in more detail what they want?
Yes, sir. We'll go ahead and pull the site plan so we can kind of be referencing it as well. So the request is from Matt and Jenny Martell, they're requesting a 12-foot setback variance from the applicable. And to clarify, typically in the R15, we have 30-foot street setbacks. We do have provisions in the ordinance that allows variations with that based on staff assessment and from the administrator that we can approve. One of those was the front setback, which we have a provision in the ordinance that we can set a maximum 20-foot street setback based on properties within 100 foot of the property boundaries that are closer to the street. So we can base that off an average of those. So the one house to the left, Mr. Gregory Needham's property, is fairly close to the property. So we assess that, and the property front setback is set at 20 feet instead of 30, and it's reflected on the survey. The rear property line, we have a provision there on secondary, or basically like a rear type setback. You can apply a 20-foot setback to that as well. Staff felt like this is a rear street to this property, so we applied the 20-foot setback to this as well on the rear of the property. So the request is 12-foot variance from that applicable 20-foot street setback on the rear of the property. Number one is the construction of a second story in the same footprint of the existing house, same foundation lines. Also along with that, I'm going to point to this, the applicant is also proposing 2 decks on the rear of the property, and we can see that more in the site plans as we move along. But the addition is proposed on this same footprint. The applicant is proposing extending this out, which they can by right, to this setback here. And I think the purpose is it's going to open them up to some stair construction and things like that inside. But the majority of this will be on this existing footprint here. This deck is existing. There's nothing going there. There's no encroachments with that. Just a second story and then the 2 decks. And we can see that in some pictures as we move along as well.
Go back. You said they're gonna, at the front there, you said something about stairs.
So This is the current outline of the house here. The street setback is here. There's the 20-foot street setback. So they're proposing extending this part of the house out to that. The overhang will come to it. There's not a variance needed there. That's within the setback as by right. Make sense?
Thank you, yeah.
And I think what it's doing is it's opening them up to the renovation inside. And they can correct me if I'm wrong in their presentation. I believe they're looking at some stairs and trying to make that happen in that area. So going back, the same footprint as this, and the decks are here. And we can see those in a moment as we move along in the site plans. The second story will consist of the same footprint as the existing structure. So from the first, second floor, as you see in the pictures, there's no encroachment there. The encroachment and the variance request is based on the second story on top of the house, which is an additional encroachment. The two decks they're requesting, they need 5-foot street setback for both of those. One of the decks will be on the second floor coming off of this deck. And the second deck will be on the the new story that they're proposing, which would be the third level from the back there. One of the decks is 4 foot wide by 9 inches long by, and the second deck is 4 foot 2 inches by 9.5 inches long. Cover that, decks.
Give us, please, the ordinance number that allows the 20-foot setback rather than the usual 30. What ordinance allows it?
The street setback, based on that 20 foot for the main front entrance is section 16-12.4.6.
Thank you.
That's for the average houses along the same setback on the same side of the street. And then to reduce the 20 foot on the rear street is section 16-12.4.9. And that's to allow a maximum of 20 foot on the street to the rear of the property.
I'm sorry, give me again that last ordinance section, 16-12 point.
.4.9.
Thank you. That's the one that actually says you can do 20 feet.
Yes. So the encroachment and variance, the applicants have laid out what would be encroaching in that setback, outside that setback. Again, the existing footprint is this, as you see here. And the second story would be within that confine there. So this is the variance for the second story that's being requested and for the decks here. The request for the 12 foot is the maximum that they would need here to capture that encroachment, and then 5 foot is the additional deck here. They would need 5 foot to capture that variance to cover both decks. I think with that, if there's any question, I think maybe it's clarification. I know there's a lot going on these site plans. The applicant has laid you a larger one here to help see a little bit better, but just answer any questions that you may have or clarifications.
Let's talk some more about your staff report. Would you go through it page by page and tell us what each thing is and what was provided by the applicant, or is any of this stuff provided by the town? If you want to just lead through it page by page, and just a quick explanation of what's in there.
Page 5, you will have an overview aerial of the property itself, where it's located on Dogwood Road.
Who provided this?
Staff provided that.
You?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Page 6 is the most recent survey. This was provided by the applicant, which is an as-built boundary survey.
What's the red dashed line in there?
There's a topography.
But the area
It
where
looks like
trees would be
they're-
removed.
those are topography. They're based on an elevation, it looks like. If it's going to a tenth of an elevation, I believe.
Like there's 950 and 960 over there, okay. Fair enough.
I don't think those have any bearing on the variance, but just, they're there for reference on this. This was also a topographic survey, so they probably pulled it out and surveyed them, just to clarify those. Page 7 is provided by the applicant, is the survey overlaid with where the encroachment is being proposed on the second story and on the decks. Which, again, that's where you see the decks there. And then page 8 is the boundary and topographic survey provided by the applicant, just showing the survey itself. Continuing on, the applicant has provided, this is a front elevation photo of the house. And this was in their packet here. This was all provided by the applicant, showing the existing structure here. This is from the top of Dogwood, and then showing the proposed 2-story or second story here. Existing building height, proposed elevation 23 feet, and that's from the main entrance here, which is well within the maximum height allowed in the R15, which is 30 feet. The applicant also provided a rendering here. This is based on the rear of the property inside. I think more notably, these elevations here will probably give you a better idea of what's being proposed. This is all the existing structure here. This is the proposed second story. This is existing here. That's not being reconstructed anyway. And then this is the 2 proposed decks. The next following pages will probably be an overlap of their presentation, I think they have, and the request. And I think that's all that was provided in the packet.
And you included in the packet, the staff report, a listing of the factors that are required by law to be proven
Yes, sir.
by the applicant.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Just for academics, some of this is on the footprint that's already there. And then there's cantilevered, and I don't know what that means on any of this things.
I had to look it up myself.
Okay.
We're gonna ask Mr. Troyer to define it. That's sort of in his bailiwick.
Yeah,
In-
no, that's it.
And I can also answer that real quick. The decks you see, pull up here. The decks you see here are cantilevered, but you would still assess it from a site plan looking down.
Sure.
As that being the encroachment.
Kind of like a gutter line.
Right. Yeah, right. So the cantilever really don't have a bearing on the variance request
Right.
itself.
I've got some questions, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else want to start off though with questions of the planning director? Any more questions? All right.
Somewhere in here, it's mainly on the existing foundation.
It's supposed to be exactly on the footprint.
Well, and then there's this footnote on the front where you bumped out a little bit.
So
That's it.
let's just
That's-
clarify.
That's
That
still
was-
in the
that's allowed-
envelope.
That's allowed under the.
Yes, the
20 foot
20
setback.
feet setback.
So that 20-foot setback will be probably in this area right here. So they're wanting to propose bumping that front out, which would be within the allowed setback there. So they don't have to request any variance or anything there.
Can you pull up,
And that'll be shown on construction drawings when they're submitted.
can you pull up the site plan? How, going to the, up on the north side, the front of the house, how wide is the street, the public street, Dogwood Lane? Do we know?
It's a single lane.
Single lane.
Basically, it's a single lane.
Yeah, I don't have that
I don't know the
information.
exact width, but it's a
It'd
single.
be hard for two
We
cars
drove
to
down
pass
there,
each
it's not
other.
a
There's no way two
two-lane
cars
road.
can pass.
Do we know, is it on the drawing?
We would have to scale it off on that drawing probably. I think the width you're looking at is this here. And I'm going to make a rough estimate that it's probably 10 to 12 foot wide.
Okay. So the existing structure, the house, is at its closest point. What's the distance to the road edge, which is where we take the street setback? What's that distance now?
Let's see if you and I are on the same question. Look at those steps there. They're out in the town's land, 5.8 feet and 4.9. Are we on the same page?
Right, right.
Thank
So
you.
your
at the edge
question
of the-
was from the property line to the edge of the street?
From the structure to the edge of the street.
If you'll bear with me just a moment, I've probably got that where I measured.
Okay. That's the road. I'm just,
The stairs come up from the road or down.
Down from the road.
I don't, well, structure-wise, the house at its closest point, how far is it from the road? That's what I want.
You mean currently?
I think it would be that little
It's-
on the right, lower right-hand side. It's got, yeah, that room,
Here's the closest point,
yeah.
and we're probably about 10 feet, plus or minus,
Okay,
10 to 11.
Yeah. That's right.
It's not really non-conforming.
And the deck is probably even closer.
well, they want a 12-foot variance. Where does that number come from?
So the 12-foot variance is based on, there's no variances requested on the front of the property. The addition will be within the confines again of this setback here. So when they bump this out, they will be within that setback, so they're fine there. The requested setback is based on this second story, that's the existing footprint. So their encroachment on that second story is coming from this point to here. So that's the new second story within the setback. And that measurement is 12 feet to here. That's the max that they would need to put the second story on.
Okay.
And then
And then it's another 8 feet to the road?
here, well, the deck, this is the covered deck on the rear. This is not being modified anyway.
Say that again.
Let me show you, let me go back to that, sorry. Let me go back to that elevation real quick. This is the new second story here. This is the deck, covered deck that you see that's not being changed. If you look on the site plan there where
And
it
at
says
its
deck,
close- At its closest point, how far is that deck, the existing deck, from the street setback
okay,
on that south side?
you're probably looking at, get back, turn around here.
When we sat there,
like
it
6
seemed like
feet.
you could almost touch that wall from your car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stone wall. And then
So-
there wasn't any more feet over there, that post.
So the second story is here, so I don't know this measurement here. That's the corner of the second story. Now, the corner of the existing deck here, this is the overhang of that deck, which actually encroaches probably over the property line here. But this whole thing is in the setback, but that corner of the deck, and probably what you would see with the overhang there is, I mean, I think there's a measurement there of, on one of them, I think it's like 2 feet, I believe. Yeah,
So the existing deck basically goes almost
Yeah,
to
so-
the property line.
so the overhang right here is 1.9 foot south of the property line. So here's the property line, and that's where it encroaches over. And then you're probably 4 or 5 feet to the edge of the or the pavement road edge here. This is not being changed. Just the second story right here with this footprint. So where that second story will go up will be this line right here. And that's the 12 feet right here that they're requesting to make sure the second story, that they need a minimum of 12 feet.
All right, so the existing house, if this was a vacant lot and they wanted to build the existing house exactly where it is, would it meet current setback requirements?
No,
Same with
But, so it's non-conforming, as it sits now, legal non-conforming and grandfather,
that's correct.
including the existing deck that's right to the property line.
That's correct.
It's grandfather.
Yes.
In the section on the front that's non-conforming, they're not going up on that, correct?
Right, what they need help with is on the south side.
Yeah. This section's non-conforming here, but this is
but they're
not, and they're
on the
bumping
second.
out to that. It still would be within, it would be not, it would be conforming there as they bump out to the setback.
Gotcha.
This is not being changed as well. The footprint will be along this here. It will be within the setback.
Let's see if you and I can pose the same question. If you were building that house today, you'd get to build that little golden triangle in the middle.
Yeah.
No, it would not meet setback requirements today. No, you could not.
No.
If you were building a new
That
house.
golden triangle is what you'd be allowed to build today.
Right.
From scratch.
From scratch, you could just build within that little
Right.
triangle, because that's all 20 feet.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
I'm not trying to be intelligent, I'm just saying that when you look at this, that's what you could build for a house there today,
I got you.
without a
Without
variance.
All right,
And without the flexibility to the 20-foot street setback, pretty much useless piece of property.
let's go through some housekeeping matters, Mr. Johnson. Have you sent out all the required public hearing notices for this case?
Yes, sir.
Did you mail a notice to the to the applicant or the property owner?
Yes, sir.
And did you send notices of this hearing to owners of all parcels of land abutting the land here that is the subject of this hearing?
We did. We sent to, I think, 11 adjacent property owners.
Don't tell us what they said, but did you hear back from any of those 11?
I did receive a phone call from one neighbor,
Don't tell us what they said, but you can tell us who it was. Who was it?
Mr. Gregory Needham.
Can we ask if it was just clarification?
We can't ask anything about what he said. We can ask who it was,
Okay.
but we can't get his words in. It's hearsay.
He's the property owner.
Did you put up the required sign for the public to see?
Yes, sir.
Does any other board member have any questions, Mr. Johnson?
Did you advertise the variance hearing in the paper?
We did. Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? All right, Mr. Troyer, Ms. Waters, and Mr. Martello, do any of you have any questions of Mr. Johnson?
No questions.
All right, and we now will turn to the applicant's presentation here. Including in the staff report was a listing of what you have to show. So with that in mind, if you would please, who wants to go first?
I get the privilege to go first.
Very good,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, thank you. Board members, thank you. Mr. Johnson, thank you. Again, just to introduce myself, I'm Matt Martella. My wife Jenny and I live at 442 Dogwood Lane. Before we get into the presentation, our objectives today are to define our case for hardship, to outline the scope of the variance, and to answer any questions or concerns you might have. Before we get into the details, I was hoping to share a little bit about my wife and I. We have lived in Charlotte for 20 years and moved from the San Francisco Bay Area about 20 years ago for quality of life. Did a long survey, ended up in Charlotte. We love the Carolinas. About 5 years ago, we sold some rental properties in Charlotte, and Jenny turned to me and said, "How would you like to live in the mountains, have a mountain home?" And the next day we were in a car looking in Boone and Blowing Rock, and didn't need to spend much time in Boone because once we got to Blowing Rock, we fell in love with the town.
How many years ago was that?
About 5 years ago. It was the summer of 2018. And we found this property. Well, we found the view off the back of this property, to be honest with you. And I think you've all been there. Hopefully it was clear when you saw it. We bought the house. We renovated it inside. It had been owned for over 45 years by the same family. And we really at the time thought, well, this would be a weekend place for us. But the more time we spent here, the more we realized we wanted to spend 6, 7, 8 months a year here. And we started to both think about how we needed more space. It's about 1,284 square feet. We've been married for 30 years. We love each other, but that's a little tight for the two of us to be full-time up here. Along the way, we've gotten involved in the community as well. I'm an adjunct professor at App State University in the marketing department. And we started this journey which led us to here tonight, and that's why I wanted to give you the background. The first thing we thought was we need more space. but it's got to hit some criteria. We love the walk to town from the neighborhood. We obviously love the view. It's hard to recreate that. And so we couldn't find another property, and what we did is said, let's naturally look at going not up, but out to the right, which is the direction that we would logically think about going. And unfortunately, and I won't spend a lot of time, I just wanted to outline the 3 hardships, because we're going to get into each of these in detail in the presentation. The first hardship we ran into was the power line hardship, and we'll go into great detail there. I was able to meet with Wayne Reese of Blue Ridge Energy. He's an engineer with them. We ran into a pretty difficult hardship. Again, we'll detail that. From there, we said, well, if we can't go out to the right looking at the property, the only direction to go is up. And when we started to look at going up, we ran into 2 other hardships we'd like to present to you today, which is the boundary hardships of the road on 3 sides. And then as you looked, and you have it in front of you, as you looked at the diagram here, that blue section that we keep talking about, if we don't sit it directly on the foundation as it sits today, we believe we introduce some structural integrity hardships as well. So, based on these 3 hardships, and we'll go into detail, we're looking for the variance request. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to go over that diagram in detail. But I do think it's important to emphasize that we're staying within that original foundation. We're not looking to extend. I know there was some discussion here about the existing deck, and you're correct. If we scraped it and tried to build it today, it would be solely in that golden triangle, which obviously would make sense. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
You're welcome to turn it over to him when we're finished with you, but
Oh, I'm
unfortunately,
sorry.
when you step up,
Yes.
you have to answer our questions.
Yeah.
Tell us about the power lines. Can we pull up the
Yeah.
diagram that shows the power lines and tell us?
Kevin, should we show some?
Oh, we're gonna ask him too,
Okay. All right, great.
and we're not gonna limit your presentation at all.
Okay. That's right.
Before you sit down, I know we'll have some questions. Tell us more about the power lines and your interaction with Bremco and what happened.
Yeah, so March of 2023, I met with the gentleman there, the engineer, and we stood, if I could just sort of turn around for a minute, if you don't mind. We stood at the top of Dogwood, so that solid red line is the actual power line. And we stood at the top of the road. And what he explained to me was, if we were able to move the lines, it introduces a new 15-foot easement on each side of the line. So today, that easement isn't honored. There's trees, there's all kinds of other stuff in the way. So he said, let's first start with, can we move the lines? The problem you have at the top is that it sits so close to the property line of the Needham's house. There's not much space to move that pole. If you move this pole down here, you would have to create an angle that would require the cutting of 10 to 12 trees that provide a nice natural buffer to our houses. And Jenny and I are not going to want to do any of that. I incidentally did share text messages with about this variance with Greg Needham, and he had no issues with it. I told him we want to protect the buffer, we want to protect the trees. But the engineer from Blue Ridge also was trying in his head to go, could we underground these lines? And the problem you have there is, obviously you have a road, and then he said, even if we could get the lines here, we have a problem getting them back over to this pole or to this section over here. So he said, and even if we got through all of that, he goes, and we figured something out on how to move a pole, he was somewhat joking, but he said, good luck getting AT&T and Spectrum to come out here to move the lines. He said, we would move our lines, obviously, but he said, I can't get them to show up for the work that we need them to move the lines on. So, we have some photography to show you as well, to show you how those lines look in real life, but those were the discussions with the engineer.
Show us where you park your cars and the existing parking for you now.
So we have a gravel driveway right here. And that's where we park our cars.
How many cars can you park?
You can fit 3 there.
3. The roadway up on the north side, can 2 cars side by side going in opposite directions pass?
It's very, very tight. There are those on the north side, there's a storm gully. And you would need 2 average sized cars, one of them almost with that right wheel in the gully to get 2 cars past. Typically what happens on our street is somebody pulls into the driveway and lets the other pass.
Well, we're gonna list later as a fact the tightness, for lack of another term, the tightness of the road. How would you describe the tightness of the road up there at the north? Is it a 1 lane, strictly 1 lane, or is it, how would you describe it? It's tight.
I would describe it as a 1 lane. I mean, it's 1.5,
Right.
if that's even something. It's not comfortably 2 cars cannot pass comfortably on that road.
Right. I drove by it and I thought, my gosh, how does a fire truck come down here?
You should see the UPS truck driver every week come up and down, but I mean, does it every day.
And the parking you have, the gravel parking for 3 cars, your cars are completely off the roadway in parking.
That's right.
space. You're not in the roadway at all, okay. Any other questions?
A part of this variance request includes decks, as I understand it.
See that?
And what is the purpose of those decks?
The purpose of each of the decks is to really to enjoy the view outside our main family room, as well as outside what would be our new master bedroom suite on the additional level north.
And how wide are those decks?
We have this deck number.
4 feet
4
wide.
feet, yeah.
And the lower deck connects to, I guess, a larger deck
The existing.
that allows you to, what do you do on that larger deck that's in existence now?
We have our, a table and we eat meals out there. We have a small couch out there. We sit out there and enjoy the Johns River Gorge.
So that's more of a socialization, whereas as opposed to more narrow decks, which,
The narrow decks would simply be a small chair and a table to just sit out in. The longer deck that would connect to the existing, right now we have windows that overlook that view. We would like to put a more dramatic set of windows and a slider in, so even if we weren't out on the cantilever deck, we would be able to have that open air feel and the view from inside the property.
so the longer deck probably is more of a passageway than to the larger deck?
I never really thought about, I'd probably just to stand, to sit, and to move to the bigger deck.
Is there another way to get to the larger deck?
Yeah, so there's a door right here that gets us to the larger deck.
I have one last question, Mr. Martell, if you want to go ahead and sit down and let Mr. Troyer answer. My question's going to be, you heard earlier as we were going over some advice from the UNC School of Government, talking about unnecessary hardship, and the applicant would need to show unique aspects of his property that makes things more difficult for him. So I'd like for either you or Mr. Troyer to tell us what's unique about this property that makes it harder for you than maybe the guy next door. Do you want to answer that? Or you want to-
I'll answer that, yeah.
Okay.
We believe that sitting on that small corner and that hairpin turn where we're both bound pretty strictly by the power lines first and foremost, which is not unique to every property, but where they sit on this property are on the only side that allows us to build out. We went into it with a mindset of if they were able to be moved even under our cost, we'd be open to doing that. The moment we hit that wall from a number of fronts, we then realized the other uniqueness of our property is that very few properties are bound by a road on three sides. I don't know, I probably could guess on two hands on all the properties in Blowing Rock. And of those on hairpin turns, how many have power lines on one side and three roads on another side? So we think that creates a very unique case of hardship.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from Mr. Martell? All right, Mr. Troyer? And if anybody needs to take a break, just say so.
Good evening.
You could send out for drinks.
Thank you for your time and consideration of these things we're discussing this evening. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank Mr. Martell and his family for your contribution to the community. It's much appreciated. So I'd like to get more into details of what's represented here.
Do you want your PowerPoint?
No, I'd like this, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I'd like to get into the details of what's represented here on this sheet and which is the same as what you have in front of you. And as discussed by Mr. Johnson, I like the golden triangle. That's a good, that is the allowable area that the setbacks allow the home or the structure to be expanded, which, absent the power lines, the most obvious place for the home to be expanded would be right here. And of course, that was plan A. Let's just go ahead, expand the home within that allowable area. It's just a given, we just follow a process that's already in place to apply for a permit and do that. But again, as Mr. Martell outlined, moving these power lines have become a very, very significant hurdle and riddle to solve. So as outlined by Mr. Johnson, this line is established simply by 20 feet from the edge of the road. That's how this line is established, this yellow portion. And then, of course, this is established by the 20-foot setback from this property line. One of you had mentioned the wall, the rock wall that's there in the property line. That's how this line is established. And of course, this line is established by the 12-foot setback of the neighboring property. So that's the logic behind how are these three lines derived in the first place. The three yellow lines, which is the allowable, buildable space on this lot. Of course, all of this and the brown lines are Dogwood Lane, as mentioned before. So the second thing I'd like to point out is the green box. As Mr. Johnson outlined and mentioned, this is an existing deck, covered, it's actually a covered porch. It's 2 levels. And as mentioned before, this area right here from the corner of the deck itself to the property line is about 2 feet. It's about this far. It's, when you're out there on the street, you're looking right over at the foundation of it. But the reason it's important that we wanted to point out and highlight is everything that we are requesting within the variance are well within an established line on the property, meaning this proposed new deck is coming 5 feet off of the home, but is still between 5 and 6 feet at this point here behind this existing line and existing structure that's already there. And I have some photos in a moment that'll give some visual reference for that. Which brings us then to the, and I'd also like to talk just for a moment about this red area here. I'll show a visual reference that if this power line were to be moved, there are some beautiful trees here that would be need to be removed, and there would be a domino effect, not just the trees on the Martellus property, but the domino effect of trees that would be affected down here as a result of moving this pole, and some trees likely here and on a neighboring property, because the power company has 15-foot easement on both sides of the power line, a total of 30 feet, for them to remove trees, maintain trees, and do it at their discretion.
And the trees are on Martellus property.
Some of them are, yes, but there are trees that would be affected that are not on their Martellus property as well.
And that owner would have to sell or get permission.
No, not if the power company, if it's within the power company's easement, the power company has the authority to maintain or move the trees. Which it's a good question, and the more you think about and we talk about moving these power lines, the levels of complexity that come with this, not just the power lines, the trees, the substation that feed them, the phone, internet, the complexity is just a domino effect that just keeps going. Which is why we get here to the blue portion, because we've come to the conclusion that the most effective way to increase the square footage of the home, which we were hoping to do here, is just simply this blue area, which is minimal. As Mr. Johnson said, it's 12 feet here and it's 5 feet here, and is on the existing footprint. And I'll speak to that to bring some clarity to some of the questions earlier. The existing footprint of the home that comes across the back of the home in the moment is here, it jogs here, it comes across like this. Everything that we're proposing remains on that, which is why we're proposing cantilevering the decks, or essentially supporting the decks from the exterior wall. And there's not any additional posts or footings or anything contacting the ground in addition to what's already there in this back line. I'll reference this again because because of the level of detail for context. As mentioned, this is a photo of the front of the home. To your question, you had a good question earlier asking about this portion of the home that is within that photo I just referenced is this portion of the home here, which this will remain as it is. The second level will only go from this line back. An example of that is here. This is that portion that remains as is, and then the requested second level is here from the primary side of the dogwood. And look, we'd be seeing it from here as well. This is an existing. I do want to point out the requested elevation. It's currently 13 feet. The requested elevation is to add 10 feet, to take it to 23. The town ordinance allows 30 feet. We're not requesting that. We don't feel we need that. And but I just want to note there's 7 foot of margin there that's not requested and is in the current design.
Is that dark thing running up the side of the house, a new chimney? Is that a chimney?
Yes, sir. That is an existing chimney that would be added to the additional 10 feet as well. So there is, I want to the point I was mentioning before, I want to point out, you see this stake and ribbon and this stake and ribbon. That represents where that golden line on the back goes across the home. This is also a very good visual reference of this existing covered area where the new deck we're proposing would come out to about this point across here. But there would still be this amount back to here that's behind it within that existing footprint. So let's talk about more the detail of the power lines. And I'd like to read this because it brings clarity to the complexity. After meeting Blue Ridge Energy, the following complications are involved with any relocation of poles and lines. A 30-foot or 15 feet on each side of the power line maintenance easement is required with any new location, and this easement required would impact neighboring properties. I think that's important to point out, that it would impact more than just the Martella property. And then the second point, additionally, 10 large trees will need to be removed. Some are located on the Martella property, most or some are not, which would greatly diminish the natural buffer between the properties. We have a visual reference for that in a moment. And then Blue Ridge Energy said that getting Spectrum and AT&T to move their lines, should we reposition the poles, is virtually impossible. And as Mr. Martella mentioned, there's the option of moving the power lines above ground, which is very cumbersome. But moving these power lines underground, because of the topography of the road, I'm sure there's rock, is essentially not an option.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't get that sheet. Did anyone else get it?
This is supplemental.
Is it?
That's their presentation.
This sheet is supplemental.
Okay, okay. It's got some good stuff on it. Would you have an extra copy?
We could get you a digital copy, yes.
Do you have
Or
any
printed
paper copy? You don't have a paper copy?
Of course not.
Okay.
But we'd be happy to get that for future reference. Given the Martello's love for trees and natural aesthetic, as well as the burden of the neighbors and neighborhood, this option was not pursued. I do want to note that the Blue Ridge Electric, or Bremco, has confirmed that the upper level will be grandfathered into the existing maintenance agreement. Meaning, if we keep the power lines where we are, and if the variance is approved, we put a second level. Blue Ridge Electric has confirmed that leaving the power lines to just as they are is in keeping with their expectations, with their comfort level.
Did you get that in writing from them?
Yes, sir.
Can you provide that to us?
Just one question. We're talking about removing trees and things like that. If you took the addition out to the right side, how many trees would you end up taking down because of that?
That's a great, the addition itself,
Yeah, if you were to expand the house to the right, you would
Well-
have to take down trees as well. No?
well, yes and no. It would all depend. If I go back to this, the trees, I'll show a photo in a moment, the trees are over here. If there's an addition here, in this portion, the answer would be 0. If the addition went all the way over to the setback, there would be, I would say, 4 to 6 trees.
Yeah, or I think less than that.
Yeah. But if for the sake of conversation, the power lines weren't here, we were providing an addition here, I think the design would be such that none of the trees would be removed for the addition. Do you concur with that?
I concur, yeah, and it would be our intention to design it so that we would remove no trees.
So on the topic of the trees, I'll show a visual reference. This is a visual reference of what we're talking about. This, to your question, Mr. Springs, the fireplace that you mentioned, this is the fireplace from the Martella property. This is the power pole right here, and you see the lines going down through here. You can see where the power company is already, has cleared and maintained that space. The property line is right in here. And this, you'll see, is the neighboring home and property. So if these power lines were moved to the right, these are the trees we're looking at here on both the Martella property and the neighboring property. And this is from Dogwood Lane, the upper part of Dogwood Lane, the northern part, looking towards the south, towards the view. This is on the southern part looking up. But you see the natural buffer that these trees provide. You see how mature they are and just how attractive they are. And equally, the absence of them is certainly not something that the Martellas are wanting. And also, as per conversations that Mr. Martellus had with the neighbors, they are very much advocates of keeping these trees. And I think keeping those trees are a net benefit for the community holistically. there's three, as mentioned, there's three components to the case for hardship. But because this is such a important part of this, before I move to the second case, it probably would make, or do you agree, Chairman, to open the floor for questions about this first case prior to going to the second?
Give me a title for your three cases. What's the first case called?
Power lines.
Okay, and what's your second case gonna be called?
The second is the street Dogwood Lane being on three sides.
Gotcha. And the third
The
is,
third is structural challenges.
okay. That's a great idea. Let's go ahead and ask you questions on the power lines. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Troyer on the power lines? Okay.
For clarification, if the variance, if our request is approved, the power lines, the trees, everything stays just as it is.
If you were approved as in the way you're being requested, would any trees anywhere on the Martella property need to come down?
No, sir.
Okay.
And that's a high priority both for the applicant and for us as the builder as well.
Okay, let's go to your phase two.
Okay? So the second portion is the boundary restriction. Mr. Martella referenced this, but it is unique to have one street on three sides of a home, not just on the three sides, but this close to the home. As mentioned, the rear deck is about this far from the property line. So I'll read this as well for reference. The property is uniquely bordered by Dogwood Lane on three sides of the property, with the power line easement on the fourth side. We believe that in its own right, this is a distinct rarity. The primary setback on Dogwood Lane is the northern front of the home, measured from the edge of the road. The southern side of the home is already bisected by the secondary setback of Dogwood Lane. This boundary is measured from the property line. The eastern side of the home is already restricted by the setback of Dogwood as well. And that is clearly outlined in the survey that you're looking at in front of you. But there simply isn't anywhere. There simply isn't anywhere to go with Dogwood on three sides and the power line on the fourth. And of course, that's another, just a visual reference to that.
Any questions at this point? Please continue, Mr. Troyer.
Okay. The reason we've placed this photo here on this, for this reference, is to point out, well, there's a few things I'd like to point out here. One is this is the corner here. This corner here is where it's 2 feet from the property line. When the requested decks come across here, it does intersect. If you take this line and if you were to transpose this line up the side of the building, a portion of the deck that we are requesting to build is within the setback. So here, the portion of the deck that is part of the variance would be just from this point over to meeting this point, which the total deck is about 24 feet, but it's probably only 14 or 16 feet up that is within or without outside of the setback and part of the requested variance. So, yes, that is an overview of the second case for hardship. Would you like me to proceed to the third?
Any questions at this point? Yes.
So is the upper deck within the setback, or is it also requiring a variance?
Yeah, good question. The upper deck is the line is going across right here. So there's this portion to the left of the main level deck is within the setback. Everything to the right is outside of that, and it's the same thing here. Probably about 2/3 of the upper deck is within the variance request, and about 1/3 is within the setback.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Okay, so the case number 3 is structural integrity. We are proposing and hoping to build on top of the exterior walls of the existing foundation. So any attempt to honor the exact boundary restriction setbacks would require a structural build inside of the existing foundation. This approach would create complex and excessive structural work due to the lack of load-bearing foundation walls to build on, and create a structure less natural to the neighborhood architecture. So I'll show you a slide here, but I'd like to provide some context for what I'm getting ready to show you. What I'm getting ready to show you is not what we're proposing to build. It's just an example of what it would look like if we built as per and within the setback. It would be this. If you imagine the setback line going across the building, and we build a second level as per that setback, this is what we would be looking at. And as I just said, I want to reiterate, this is not what we're proposing. This is just a visual reference of how the setback is represented on the current structure. But there is structural, there's a structural complexity to this, and an aesthetic complexity that I can say for certain the applicant is not interested in, and I don't think the community is interested in as well. Which brings us to this, which is the proposed elevations. This is as the property stands as we speak. This represents the chimney that you saw in the photo. This represents the existing covered porch, double level, and this represents what we are requesting, to take the second level up on top of the footprint of the existing home. The decks would be cantilevered, as we suggested before. The weight of the deck is carried off of this exterior wall, and there is no contact with any portion of the ground or anything outside the footprint in addition to what's existing.
So you're proposing to build on the footprint and foundation of the existing structure?
Yes, sir.
I didn't quite understand what you were talking about inside the footprint or something, going back a couple of slides. That went right over my head.
Yeah, well, for clarification, if you just look at the exterior walls on the main level, the existing main level, we would simply, this is the existing wall of the home, this is the existing wall of the home, and this upper level would simply stack directly on top of that
Right.
as well, which is structurally the most logical path to follow.
Are there structural changes, modifications you're going to need to do to add this second level?
There's some reinforcement in the framing members and in the structure to carry the additional weight. We've spoken with structural engineers and had conversations about how that can be accomplished. But adding this upper level as drawn here, while there is some structural components, it's a fraction of the complexity of doing something like that. So I'll take any questions you have, and then hand it back over to Mr. Martello.
Any questions? Okay, a couple. How long would this whole project take if we gave the variance?
The construction portion?
Everything, from the beginning the work to finishing and saying it's done, you got your permit, have a nice day.
I would say, let's say 8 to 9 months.
Can you put the plat back up?
Yes, sir.
Can you do this project and complete it without impeding and obstructing traffic on Dogwood Lane?
The utilization of this space and this existing deck space would have to be maximized.
Where the Martellos park if you're using their parking place?
The Martellos and I have had conversations about them not occupying the home while this is happening. I don't think there's room to do construction at this scale and have the home occupied.
Mr. Martello says that Dogwood Lane, they're on the north side of the house, the front side of the house. It's about 1.5 lanes. Is that what you said? I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's not adequate for two-way traffic. Would you agree with that?
I do.
Could you do this project without obstructing any of that roadway?
We've done projects on roads similar to that. It's a riddle. It takes planning, but it's what needs to be done. There have been many projects, homes renovated and built, not just here on Dogwood, but if you follow this road down, there's many more homes that have been built off of that road. We renovated a home at the end of this road. I think it was around 18 months ago. So yes, it can be done.
How many vehicles are you going to be using? I mean, I live in the neighborhood, so I know this, and there's obviously no parking other than at the Martellos until you get much further down Dogwood. So, you have more than 2 vehicles. How are you going to keep that space open so that for emergency vehicles to be able to get down there through that curve down to the bottom of Dogwood if necessary? Is someone going to be monitoring that? That will make sure that road stays open for emergency vehicles?
The town will do that.
The town will do that.
Yeah, I mean, any lane closures would have to come before the town to make sure we're aware of it.
I'm not talking about lane closure, I'm just talking about blocking the lane.
We would monitor that to the best of our ability to.
Okay, and how often does that happen?
A lot of times when we get complaints,
Okay, so if
Or-
no one complains.
or neighbors.
So if no one complains, then you don't monitor it.
not unless we're in the neighborhood, right? But we'll monitor the site. We know it'd be a tight site there.
Mr. Troyer, what would you and Mr. Martell, my questions to both of you, how would you feel about a condition? We can attach reasonable and logical conditions to any variance approval. How would you feel a condition that under no circumstances is Dogwood Lane to be blocked or impeded at all? No material on the ground, on the roadway, no trucks parked on the roadway. How would you feel to that, a condition such as that, as a condition of getting the variance, that for the entire length of the project, 8 or 9 months or however long it takes, Dogwood Lane is not impeded at all? It's bad enough as it is, it's not gonna get any worse. How would you feel about that condition?
We would be comfortable with that, because that's how we would anticipate proceeding. Blocking the road isn't something that we would want to do or feel is in keeping with good management of the project. For a little bit of context, in I think it was 2017 or 18, we did a renovation for St. Mary's Church here in Blowing Rock. At the time, the hospital was still up Chestnut Road, and we bored under the highway for stormwater management and went through a very meticulous process of collaborating with emergency management, the fire department, EMS, for actually working on the road itself. So we're familiar with maintaining and granting access to a property. Whereas this, we wouldn't be doing work on the road, we would be, of course, on the property itself, so.
If I could add, Mr. Chairman, I'm very comfortable with that restriction. I actually would hope that that restriction would go to every homeowner that is doing that kind of construction on Dogwood, which unfortunately that restriction has not been. So we do experience vehicles on the road. And there's probably an upcoming one because there's a piece of land just south of us that someone's probably gonna build a whole house on at some point. So I think it's not only a fair question and request, but it's, as stewards to our neighbors, I think that's required.
You see my concern, it's so tight in there, and you put that, it is a hairpin curve. I don't know that a fire truck, a full-size fire truck could get down there, but for sure, if this project was after it's completed and installed, if it creates a safety problem, it shouldn't be approved. And I'm looking at our Blowing Rock Code. It says substantial justice, which is one of the requirements in the fourth factor, is not achieved when granting the variance would be injurious to the neighborhood or to the general welfare. And I don't think that pertains to just the ongoing permanent injury after the project is completed. I think it would apply during the installation of the project. I went down there, as you heard, all of us that went down there and looked at the site. And I was immediately struck by how tight it was. and I typed up a condition that I've held here, waiting to see if any of the evidence I've heard changes my thoughts on that. And I haven't heard anything. I'm going to read it to you, and I want to get your thoughts on it. And this is if we granted the variance with the mandatory condition of this condition. The Board of Adjustment makes the following mandatory conditions of the granting of these variances, and these mandatory conditions last from the beginning of building and construction activity related to the two decks in the second-story addition until the end of that activity and a successful permit of completion being issued by the Blowing Rock Town Building Inspector. The condition is that there's be absolutely no parking of vehicles or placement of materials related in any way to the building and construction of the two decks and second-story addition in the roadway of Dogwood Lane, from curb to curb and side to side of Dogwood Lane. This includes all of the roadway of the Blowing Rock Street, Dogwood Lane, and not just the roadway adjacent to the property at 442 Dogwood Lane. It's all of Dogwood Lane. Vehicles related to that building and construction may stop and stand for brief periods of time, not to exceed 15 minutes, to load and unload materials and equipment. During such loading and unloading, the vehicle is not to be left unattended for any period of time. As a further condition, there must be a sign prominently displayed and visible in the front of the property at 442 Dogwood Lane, and the sign must be as follows. It must be 8 feet by 4 foot in size, standing erect, and with the following wording boldly written on it and visible from the street. During construction here, the owner has agreed to not block or impede the Dogwood Lane roadway. Any problems with the roadway being blocked can be reported to the Blowing Rock Planning and Inspections Office at telephone 828-295-5240. If you gentlemen want to step out in the hall and confer, I'm going to ask the question, do you have any problem with that? As a condition of this, would you like to confer and we can take a little break?
I'm comfortable, the applicant and I are both comfortable accepting.
You okay with the sign?
I'm comfortable with it as well.
Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get it. I'm one of 5. We got a lot of talking and a lot of deliberation together, but we'll tuck that into the mix. Does anyone need to take a break? Is it just me?
We'll go take a break.
Let's take a break, 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Where were we, Mr. Troy?
We were having conversations about the expectation and language about not blocking the road
Okay.
and keeping access,
All right, that's right. You-
which Mr. Martell and I have just conferred, and not only are we comfortable with that, that's in keeping with the expectation of how we would plan to manage the job. Anyway, a question we would have, though, is that the neighboring property, this property right here is recently sold. If a, say, and that's a vacant lot. We
What
feel-
happens if they block it?
Yeah,
Well, that's not gonna be your fault, so that's not relevant.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just get clarified, if they don't have to come in front of a variance board and they can build a full house, they presumably aren't, being held to the same language that would be correct?
They're being held to more stringent rules than you are because they're gonna have 30-foot setback.
I'm sorry.
He's talking about blocking, I think.
He's
Blocking
talking
the road.
about blocking the road.
Oh,
What's the town
That's up to the
regulation
town- that's
for
the
any
town
construction project, period, end of story?
So, town's policies, you do not block a road, period. But we understand construction has to happen. We understand there's narrow roads in town. We do allow lane closures, unloading, offloading the construction. But there is a system that goes through our fire department, through our police department, 911, that alerts neighbors and alerts the neighborhood when those lane closures need to be done. And typically, we want timeframes with those, so we're sure of it.
but you
Now-
understand, this is nothing like what you just described.
Absolutely. So, I
This is
mean,
a totally different animal.
but we understand that a lane may need to be closed at some point. But that being said, we
That ain't
don't,
gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen.
well,
This project.
that's what I'm saying. It could require a lane closure for a certain determined amount of time.
Not on this project, if the conditions attached to
Well,
it.
That's
not
up to
gonna
the
happen.
board.
They'll have to figure something out.
I can commit to saying we wouldn't request a lane closure.
Well, it's real simple. If we find you meet the 4 factors and we attach this condition, and you violate the condition, the town attorney should absolutely do what he needs to do, and that's gonna be void out your variance and kill your project at whatever point it's at that point. It's gotta have teeth in it or it doesn't mean anything. And you're gonna get aggravated, Mr. Martello, you will, every time you go by somebody else's project and they're making a mess and blocking the street, but we can only deal with what is here before us.
Understood. And Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, we're comfortable with the language. In practicality, this happens about once a month on our street because somebody needs to take a tree out and a tree company needs to block for like an hour or 2. And we've come up with a practical system as neighbors where we email ahead of time those windows. We won't do that for this project, but I wanted the board to know that we realize we're on a narrow street as a neighborhood. We realize it's a dead end. And in addition to everything else the town is requiring, we try to work ahead of that as neighbors as well.
Okay, that's good. All right, very good. Mr. Troy, do you have anything else to say?
No, you've heard the overview of our case for hardship.
Okay,
We're happy to answer any questions.
okay. Any questions of Mr. Troy? Okay, all right. You've made a good presentation, Mr. Martin. So you have too. All right, Mr. Troy, you may sit down.
I would, Chairman, may I ask a quick question? of
Yeah,
Mr.
I'm
Troy?
sorry.
It just come to my mind that my understanding that this property is on a private sewer, correct? I would just relay that anything being built would have to go before Caldwell County's Health Department. They're the one that regulate the sewer system. So any impact of that would have to be approved for them before anything could happen,
Well,
if there's an impact.
So the building inspector guy will get involved in that. Right.
I just wanted y'all to be aware of that.
On that topic, we wouldn't be changing or adding to any of the capacity. number of bedrooms to stay as they are.
But that's a process they'll go through to verify that, yeah, the health department.
Well, they're gonna have to meet all the building inspectors,
Correct.
hurdles and hoops. That's just one more. Let me ask you a couple of questions of anybody. Does anybody know when this house was built?
1964,
64?
that's correct.
And it is Matthew and Jenny Martell on the deed listed
It
as owners. Mr. Troy, you're welcome.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just for clarification, it may sit in our trust. But the trust is on, our name on the trust as well.
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Ms. Waters just said it is under our name, the deed is under our name.
okay. And both your names are on the
Yes,
deed? Okay.
correct.
All right, would anybody like to do our findings of fact?
I think we've explored this. It's time to do your questions.
Can we have a little discussion? I think I see two components to this. One is the structural component of increasing the house size itself. And the other, I think, is the deck, which and the question is, are both should be treated equally, or should we look at them separately?
I think I think we've got really 3 variance requests here.
Right.
Actually, I think the town could have charged you $400 times 3. You got 2 decks and you got a second addition. And each one will rise and fall on its own. So you may get approval for your decks and not your second addition, or vice versa. Each one is different. And having said that, I'd like to, as I write this up, refer to the addition as the second-story addition, and the decks as the 26-foot deck and the 23-foot deck. Any objection from me? Just
Do this for my simple mind. Are you working on the front variance first?
There's no variance for the front.
we'll talk about them all together, but when we do our motions and so forth, we've got to address each one in its own right. Okay. Any more questions, Dr. Rockamore?
Thank you.
Okay. Variance application number, we're going to go through the findings of fact. And if anybody, any applicant or property owner wants to interrupt us while we're doing the findings of fact to correct something or add something, that's fine. This is real informal. When we get to the conclusions of law, we will stop the evidentiary hearing, and then it's our deliberation, and as far as input from the applicant and the homeowner, that ends after the findings of fact. So as I go through this, if you want to correct me or ask that something be added, just jump right in. It's variance application number 2023-02, hearing dates January 25th, 2024. The board members participating are Dr. Rockamore, Dr. Lee Rockamore, Mr. Stephen Schiller, Ms. Sarah Murphy, Mr. E.B. Springs, and Mr. Jerry Starnes. The applicant is 444. I'm going to say 444, comma, a construction company. The owner of the property in question is Matthew D. and Jenny Ann Martella. The address of the property in question is 442 Dogwood Lane, Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and it was built in 1964. The property is zone R15. The applicant wants to do the following, which would violate zoning regulations and which would require a variance. A, build a second-story addition on the footprint of the existing home. which is grandfathered. For its siting on the lot. The Blowing Rock ordinances require a 20-foot street setback. That would be the right term, Mr. Johnson, wouldn't it? Street setback?
Street setback.
Would require a 20-foot street setback. And the home and second story addition would need a 12-foot setback variance, meaning the structure is 8 feet from the street setback.
Yeah.
Actually, 8 feet from the street.
Right. Yeah. So it's a 12-foot variance
Right.
over
Yeah.
20 feet.
Meaning,
It's in the
the
instruction.
meaning the structure's 8 feet from the street. Am I accurate?
12-foot setback, or is it?
It's a
so
variance
It's an 8
into
foot,
the
I think it's
20
an 8
feet,
foot.
12 feet.
It's an 8 foot into the intrusion.
A
No,
12
they want to
foot.
go 12 feet into the 20. At the closest point, it's 8 feet, right?
The closest point of the two-story.
Of the building, yeah.
Can you put the topographical?
No, not the deck.
I think it's 12 feet.
Not the deck.
Okay. So the
The deck is something else.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing with the vertical lines that are in between the golden triangle and the pre-existing deck, that is an it's grandfathered in its current status, but to get another floor on, we're gonna have to give a variance for that area.
12
And
feet.
so that is, what is that, at the lower part of the, right part of the deck there, is that longest vertical line, like, is that 8 feet? So that,
The space between the deck and the golden triangle, what is, how long is that?
12 feet here.
okay, that's
12
12 feet.
feet into the 20-foot setback.
Well, the existing deck counts. I mean, it's part of the structure.
This one,
Right.
it does, but that's not the question. The question is the second story on top of that.
They're not put- they're not
Okay,
going
so
over
the second story's on top of the gold line.
So the second story is what's requesting the 12-foot encroachment.
Banking it 8 feet from the street end.
Looks
I
like
don't-
ordination.
No, this is further than 8 feet. I'm not sure what that is. I would guess.
What do you say, Mr. Troyer? How many feet do you want to go into the 20?
The way I interpret it is, the way I interpret the 12 feet is from this corner, see, there's a corner of the existing home that connects these lines. I think the 12 feet is from here to here, and the 8 feet is from here to here.
Okay.
Potentially another way of saying, or articulating the question, is just to say the variance would be to allow a second story to be directly on top of the existing
First story.
of the existing wall.
Such that we don't have to consider the deck as being part of the home.
Yeah, as far as the additional level, it would be stacked straight above the current foundation and exterior wall.
But that measurement's 12 feet.
I think it's 12 feet from here to here.
It's, when I measured it, it was from the setback to the corner of the house.
Okay, to here, okay. Okay.
Including the eave.
So the second-story addition at its closest point is how many feet from the street?
From
8
here to
feet.
here.
Have I got that right?
Or here, or here.
That corner.
This corner, I'm not sure what that, we'd have to scale that off.
Well, if he wants a 12-foot setback
It's 20
in a
feet.
20-foot, if he wants a 12-foot variance in a 20-foot
It must be 8
setback, it's
feet.
gotta be 8.
Yeah, but
8 feet to the, 8 foot to the,
Street
to the property line. To this here. I don't know what it is to the street. But this setback here is based off of this property line.
Oh,
So we got 20 feet here.
not the road.
Why isn't it from the street?
why is it from the property line, not the street?
This one is from the street here. Excuse me, from the property line.
Just restate that. Are we working
That's,
off the?
that's basically the
property
right of
line?
way.
Are we working off the property line now, or not, or the street?
This one, yes. So, that's the overhang, correct, Kevin?
Yes.
So that overhang probably does come to here.
Yeah. I think.
So it could be, it probably is 12 to right there, that overhang.
I think 8 feet is the,
Right. And then 8 foot to that property line
8
there,
foot is the balance.
which is the right of way on that side.
So 12-foot variance.
Correct. You do a 20-foot setback.
And on the front side, what's, you're doing it differently on the front? You're going from the street edge?
Let me go back to it. So the front was measured, this one's a little bit clearer. The front, because we have to measure the neighboring property here, it's measured from the road edge here to be consistent with the neighboring property, to get a consistent measurement for the average. So this setback right here is measured from this line here.
Which is the edge of the street. I follow that.
Edge of the street.
That's a street setback. So
Right.
why aren't we doing that on the south side?
Because the property line.
Because it was just, the right of way back here is based off of this property line down here. The right of ways, some of these roads don't have right of ways on them. Typically our roads have 30-foot right of ways on them.
Right. And then you go from the middle of the street, right?
If there's not determinable right of ways, we go to the middle of the street and add 15 feet, then the setback. But this one we had to measure, so for the structure over here to determine the average, it come from, to be consistent with this property, it come from the edge of the street there. Because that whole section is based on the visual of a home being up or closer to the road, basically.
Look at this next to last paragraph on page 1. Do we agree to that? I mean, is that what we're doing?
This one here.
No, you read that.
Yeah, they've got a typo there. It's not 14 feet, it's 26 feet.
Let me go back to the deck measurements. Sorry. That's the deck measurements there. The upper one is 14 feet, which is this deck. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin.
That's right.
14 feet, and then this one is 26. Excuse me, 23 feet.
Was this a typo up in the background for first paragraph? Construction of a new 4-foot wide by
Yeah,
26.
So the upper one is probably a typo in there. So you got 14 feet here, and then this one's 23 some change. And this is, both of them are 4 foot, a little over 4 foot wide.
And portions of both the upper and the lower are conforming, correct?
About a third, about. not
Portion,
much.
yeah, the setback line is probably
So
through
it's
here.
just a section of that.
Right. So you're probably correct, and, you know, obviously the remaining is 8 foot to that property line, not to the street.
Okay, let me word it this way. So people looking at this document and the land records won't get as confused as I am. What they want to do, which requires a variance. A, build a second-story addition on the footprint of the existing home, which is grandfathered for its siting on the lot. Blowing Rock ordinances require a 20-foot street setback, and the home and second-story addition would need a 12-foot setback variance, period. I think I'll just stop at that point.
12 foot will cover the upper story addition as well as the eaves itself.
Okay. Now, B,
Do we need to cite the 20, allowing, using the 20-foot setback as opposed to the standard 30?
that would be a good idea. Let me add that.
It is a hardship when you can't even read it, you know.
And it may be worth noting that the 20-foot setbacks are administrative
The 20-foot
allowance that staff.
setback is figured using Blowing Rock ordinance section 16-12.4.9 and administrative refiguring of the necessary setback distance. Is that understandable? Okay. B, applicant wants to build a deck on the south side of the home. 14 feet long by 4 foot 2 inches wide. Which would require a 5-foot variance into the street setback. 20-foot
You
street.
and I already debated cantilever. Does that need to be in that sentence?
I don't think so.
Huh?
That just means there's no post coming down.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just,
sure.
it's kind of freestanding
Has no bearing on the
Yeah,
footprint.
it didn't bearing of the intrusion.
into
Air rates.
the decks. They require a 5-foot variance into the 20-foot street setback. Mr. Johnson, have I got that right?
Portion,
Correct.
That's like more than
not the entire deck then.
We go further maximum, we should go maximum variance. We should go in
For
for is the
clarification,
maximum
that
intrusion,
final
is what you stated.
property line setback.
Yeah, they're doing it from the property line.
There's a street
Okay.
setback on the rear.
Outside.
There are no setbacks from property lines, it's only from street centers and roads.
But it's
Well,
still a
it's
street
stated.
setback here.
What it says here.
I know, but
All that's
Into
if you look
considered
at
street
the
setback.
code,
is that term ever
It's not.
used? Property line setback? What would you call the setback on the south side?
Per the ordinance, I think the correct language, this is a street setback when you're bordered by a street. These are either a side setback or a rear setback.
So you call that the
So
south side on the
this
street?
is a street.
It's-
All
Even
of
though
this
we're
is a
going
street.
from, Even though we're going from the property line, you still call it a street setback?
Yes. Yeah, no, this would be your, I think in this situation, the side setback here. Side property line setback there.
Okay.
If you read the code,
C, applicant wants
if there's a street,
to build
a certain setback,
a deck wants to build a second deck. No, I'm just gonna say wants to build a deck. It'll be differentiating in its dimensions. Wants to build a deck on the south side of the home. 23 feet, 9.5 inches long by 4 feet, 2 inches wide. And that deck would require a 5-foot variance into the 20-foot street setback.
Yes.
The Blowing Rock zoning code ordinance sections, which is at issue here, which stands in the applicant's way, is, it's actually two, it's 16-12.4.6 and 16-12.4.9. And put into words, the ordinance requires a 20-foot street setback period. There are not other parties withstanding to come into this case in hearing, and the other parties withstanding, there aren't any. The applicant did provide drawings or sketches or plans or pictures illustrating what the applicant wants to do. The town of Blowing Rock has provided and given all necessary legal notices of this case in this hearing. There was proper notice of this case in hearing given to all property owners for property abutting the parcel of land which is at issue here. And proper notice was given to any other persons entitled to receive notice. The applicant did receive a copy of the planning director's staff report prior to the hearing. There were other witnesses in the hearing besides the applicant and the planning director, and relevant evidence from those witnesses included that shown below. The name of that witness is Matthew D. Martilla. And the witness gave evidence as to the planned construction and the hardship created by the zoning ordinances. What the applicant is proposing would not impair emergency vehicles such as fire trucks and ambulances. And just as an aside, I would say it's a bad situation, but it won't be made any worse by what Mr. Martella wants to do. And as an aside, I'll say we don't want it to be made worse during the course of construction either. But anyway, what the applicant's proposing would not impair emergency vehicles such as fire trucks and ambulances. What the applicant is proposing would not create a fire hazard. What the applicant is proposing would not block or impede visibility on any street or highway. What the applicant is proposing would not be contrary to public health and or safety. Unique features of this property include
Bounded on 3 sides by Dogwood Lane and the 4th by Power Line.
Yeah, okay, so let's call it A. Property is in the shape of an arrow. Is that a fair statement? Triangle? Yeah, that's a better word.
It's triangular.
Property's in the shape of a triangle with street, roadway, bounding the property on 3 sides. B, the property narrows greatly on the east side at a hairpin curve in the roadway. C, property is bounded on the west by power lines and fair to say, is it a 30-foot utility easement?
It is 30 on this drawing. Right.
That was number 18 in the facts. That was number 17. Number 18. I'm going to say,
Let me clarify this. If the new power line requires 30-foot easement, what was the old one?
It says 30 right here.
I know, but that's the new one, but what was the old one?
No, the existing one is 30 foot, 15 each side.
And what is the new one?
New one probably would be 30 feet, but that would be up to the
On each side?
15 each side.
So it's the same.
Should be the same.
So the power line easement is the same whether, yeah.
is that your understanding, Mr. Troy?
That's correct. The easement is the same, but if the power lines were moved, the easement would move with it,
Right.
which would then incur the removal of the trees.
And just to add, there are trees inside that existing 30-foot easement that are effectively not being cut to clear because it's an older easement.
Okay.
I would also add, the utility easement, once you affect another property owner, they typically have to agree to those easements as well.
Now, it looks like part of the deck extends into the utility easement.
That's correct.
So do you have to get permission from power company to encroach on that?
We have that.
Okay.
And some of the existing house.
Well, except the cantilever deck is extending a little
Yeah.
further.
That's good.
As a point of clarification, the blue for the deck extends a bit farther on this than it actually is. If you go to the elevation of the home, the deck doesn't go all the way to the corner of the home.
That's still outside of the
Yeah,
variance, so that doesn't require that side doesn't require variance on that end of the house, right?
That's correct, and you'll see how the deck is back from the corner of the home, which addresses that.
Fact number 18, any attempt to expand the size of the existing home toward the west side of the property would meet with extreme difficulties, if not impossibilities. Fact 19, the applicant and property owner say no trees will be removed from the west side of the property for this project. Fair? The entire project, second edition, and 2 decks, is expected to take less than a year. I don't know how solid a fact that is, but I think it's noteworthy. Can anybody think of any other facts which really ought to be listed?
What's the current square footage of the house?
1,284.
I think that's significant.
Yeah.
It's small for a married couple that's been married for over 30 years.
Yeah, September will be 30.
And how many square feet will this add of living space?
It's 725.
What's the existing square foot? Would you say 1,200?
You mean the entirety of the upper level or the portion inside the variance?
No, just
First, what's there?
What's there is 1280?
1,284.
1284, and you want to add 725?
That's right.
Okay.
The applicant wants to add, did you say 725
Mhm.
square feet? Any other facts that anyone feels should be listed?
Is your blocking the street going to be one of these
think
unique
that they're-
variant?
I've got a spot for that coming up.
Okay.
Do we want to state there are no variances as regards the north facing part of the house? He's not asking for that, just asking on the south side. It's up to you.
Well, the second story addition is every side.
No, it's not going out to the front.
That's true. That's true.
There's no variance.
There's no variance
No
for
variance
the,
request.
for the front. So there's no variance for the front.
It's just,
True. All right,
Yeah.
we'll list that. The entire project as proposed. And by the way, we forgot to make the staff report a matter of record for this case. Mr. Johnson, do you object putting your staff report into the file of this case as an exhibit?
No, sir.
All right, so the entire staff report is in the file. The entire project is proposed and shown in the staff report exhibit. Does not require any variance on the north side of the house. Have we got it?
Thank you.
On the north side of the existing house. Okay, any more facts from anybody? Okay. We're going to close I'm going to make a motion to close the evidentiary hearing, the factual hearing. And is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by
Everybody
Mr.
unanimous.
Starnes and Mr. Schill at the same time. The
Give it to.
It was unanimous.
Starnes.
evidentiary hearing is closed. We turn now to conclusions of law. The first factor is going to be that have they shown substantial material and competent evidence that in this case unnecessary hardship would result from strict application of the regulation. Does anyone want to discuss that?
Do you want to take each component of each variant separately?
Got to.
We need to.
So there's the second story and the 2 decks.
Yeah, so let me do a motion. Based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment, my motion will say finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards A, the second story addition, and we find the B 14-foot long deck.
You're going to take them separately.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
need
why
to.
don't we do it separately? Why don't we start with the second story addition?
Okay, all right. All right. So we find this unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards A, the second story addition, period. And then we'll start again. And based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards B, the 14-foot long deck. Do you think we need to put the width? Since they're so obviously different. And based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards C, the
Can we call it a 24-foot deck?
yeah. Let me just,
Approximately.
let me be
Oh,
nitpicky.
main level
The
and
20
above.
23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. Turning to, I make that motion as regards, A, the second story addition that we find they have met their burden. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Murphy. Any further discussion? All those finding that the applicant has met the burden, that there is unnecessary hardship from the strict application of the regulation as regards the second story addition. I'll say aye that find that. Aye, it's unanimous. And based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards B, the 14-foot long deck.
I would like to discuss that.
Okay, all right, please.
And looking at the definition that we have,
Yes.
this is unlike the other, which substantially changes things for them in terms of the living situation.
Yeah.
Next to your deck, 4 feet wide by 14 feet long. I'm not sure that meets the criteria. More of an inconvenience rather than, it'd be more of an inconvenience rather than a true hardship.
Isn't the hardship based on the same parameters as the addition, correct?
No, it changes because it's talking about inconvenience versus necessity. And that it uses the term, not a mere inconvenience. You know, the 4 foot wide deck is not a whole lot of deck. I mean, someone can go out there and stand.
Well,
Maybe.
it's an addition to the fuller enjoyment of the home, just like everything that everybody brings in here. I think the same unique factors of the lot, I think we would get them there on both decks. What do you think?
Again, we try to limit variances to things that are truly necessary. Okay, that truly would, if they didn't have the deck, would it make it any less enjoyable?
I would say yes.
And, I think, again, each case is unique. And my feeling is that we want to continue to maintain ordinances so that there's as minimal intrusion as possible, not just personal preference.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I feel the deck is. The upper living story, obviously, they need the extra space. I'm not sure that, and I'll say this top of the lower deck. Again, does it truly meet, is it a personal preference, wish list, or is it truly going to impact, their total enjoyment of the house? They've never had they've had neither of these decks before. They had the other deck at the end of the house.
Right.
So
It would impact, if it was my house, it would impact my level of
When I
enjoyment.
but again,
aesthetically as well, if you look at the other picture without the deck.
I know, but are we talking about inconvenience or are we talking about necessity? Well, that's what the thing is.
There was our original conversation that we could make the decision based on our judgment and not necessarily what these things said.
I mean, the letter of the law.
Huh?
We're
Yes.
here because the letter of the law sometimes doesn't cut it. So
I'm asking that question. Was our discussion such that we'd say it's not the letter of the law, but we can make that decision?
I think the
Well,
hardship.
you can certainly make it everybody.
We can bend the law if we find that they have met these factors, and not other factors, but these factors.
Well, does that answer his question, though, that we're sitting here tonight and we can make that decision, even though this, you could enjoy this house without that porch on the back or deck. But we can make that decision here tonight, that we can bend the law, the regulations,
Right.
and say it's a better house with that deck on the back.
I don't think you get into whether it's better or worse, it stays the same. It's every
They're
variance.
They're asking for variance, and we have to decide.
Okay, so we're
And
not
this-
debating that, we're just saying we can make that decision, that we grant the variance for the decks. End of section.
If we feel
I'm
like,
asking.
if we feel like they have met.
The same hardship
It's
condition.
that same nebulous term, what's unnecessary hardship. It's so hard to get your arms around.
It says it's hardship must be more than a mere inconvenience to the property owner.
Okay, let's agree that that's what that says. Then my question turns out to be, can we just say we made the decision to grant the decks? End of subject.
If we find they've met their requirement.
And this is what it says, an unnecessary hardship. This is under the definition of unnecessary hardship.
The applicant must show that the nature of the hardship, and that the nature of the hardship here is the setback, is far greater for the applicant than others subject to the same restriction. And I think they've made their case that they have a very unusual lot, quite different from
Yeah, sure.
the neighbors, and things are harder on them than it would be for the other folks in the neighborhood.
So we're not debating convenience, so.
All the variances people come here asking for are for things that expand their enjoyment for enjoyment of the property. None of it is about whether they're gonna not be able to live in a house if they
I
don't
mean,
get
you
their
could say that
variance.
about the whole second story. It's
So
not
somebody
the
else
same.
try to word that. I'm just saying, we're meeting tonight to make that decision. And we just word that properly and move on.
Excuse me.
You're on overtime.
It's 8:30 and our rule is at 8:30, we stop and decide if we can get out of here by 9:30, and if we don't think so, we continue the case. I think we'll be out of here well before 9.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Well, somebody else try to word that. I'm just saying, we're here tonight to make decisions. So we're making the decision that cantilever deck is on this house.
But we're also responsible for maintaining the town ordinances, to the town code as best we can, to keep our variances at a minimum. What happens if they asked for a 10-foot deck? Well, how would you respond?
Wow.
But my point is, that they didn't.
Well,
In
no,
fact,
but
they
I'm-
went
what I'm
really
saying is,
small. It's on, it's more good, it's like a
Let's-
Juliet balcony to open up the back of the house.
But
Let's-
again, is it more than?
Let me propose this. Let's kick the can down the road for a few minutes and come back on factor 4, which says, based upon the evidence presented, they either find or didn't find, we either find or don't find substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, the purpose, and intent of the regulation, which is the setback regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. Can we kick this down to that factor 4? All right. I'm gonna make my motion again that we covered A, didn't we? We covered the addition. We're on B. We're on the 14-foot B. I move that, based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards B, the 14-foot long deck. So I propose we find they met their burden on the 14-foot long deck. Do I have a second?
Did you say do I have a second?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the 14-foot long deck? All right, all those that find that the applicant has met his burden, and that unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards the 14-foot long deck. All those that find they met their burden say aye. Aye. Any nay?
Nay.
All right, we have one nay.
Two.
Two nay. Okay, all right. I make a motion for the 23-foot, 9.5-inch long deck. The motion being based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards C, the 23-foot, 9.5-inch long deck. My motion is that they have met their burden on C, that deck. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Murphy. Ms. Murphy seconds the motion. All those that find that the applicant, we find substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation as regards the 23.9.5 inch, 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. All those in favor say aye. 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 Any nay?
Nay.
Okay. I have two nay? Okay. All right, moving to factor 2. Based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property. The hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property. Any discussion on that? Okay. I'll make the motion first on the second story. That based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship results from conditions are peculiar to the property as regards the second story addition. I make that motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Schiller. Any further discussion? All those that find they've met their burden on this factor regarding the second story addition, say aye. 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 Any nay? That was unanimous. We'll turn to the 14-foot deck. And any discussion on the 14-foot deck? Hearing none, I'll make the motion that based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property as regards the 14-foot deck. Any further discussion on the 14-foot deck? I make the motion that they have met their burden on the 14-foot deck. Is there a second?
Can we open that a little bit?
Sure.
And now this may be a question for Mr. Johnson. Since this is a non-conforming property, is it become peculiar to the property or the fact that it's no longer conforming?
Well, that's a legal question. That's for us. At this point, we got to paddle our own canoe, Dr. Rockamore. What's your question again?
It's non-conforming.
It is.
So the question is, increasing non-conformity,
Which
is that peculiar to the property, or is that peculiar because it's standing? You know, my question is it truly peculiar to this property, or the fact that it's always been it's non-conforming?
I'd say both. I'd say both. It is peculiar to the shape and layout of the lot is odd, is peculiar
Right.
and different. The fact that the house was built in a location that would violate the zoning setback today, but it's grandfathered.
Right.
So your question really would be, is that also a peculiarity?
There's a lot of houses that were built that are outside the current.
Yeah.
Sure,
I mean, I
sure. I would say that probably is. It's kind of unique.
It's very hilly, so there's going to be a lot of
Well,
problems
the twisting and the, a bunch of hairpin curves in our neighborhood.
All right, can we continue? All right, so we're back to my motion that they met their burden on the 14-foot deck. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Starnes seconded the motion. All those, any further discussion? All those that, in favor of finding that they have met their burden on the 14-foot deck as regards this factor, meaning the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property. All those that say A on the 14-foot deck, say aye. Aye. Any nay?
Nay.
Okay, so we got 2 nay. Okay. All right, the last deck. The motion is based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property as regards the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. And any further discussion on the 23-foot deck? I make a motion that they have met their burden and we find that the hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property as regards the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. All those that find they've met their burden on this say yay. Yay?
Yeah.
Aye. Thank you. All, and any nays on that one?
Nay.
Who seconded that?
I'm sorry.
Who seconded?
Both. Oh, the
On the
rejection.
motion?
Who just seconded that motion?
I'll second it. We
I did.
I think it was Mr. Starnes, yeah.
Yes. Oh, you made me third for that time.
The nays were Mr. Schiller, Dr. Rockamore. The yays were the other 3 members. Okay, third factor. Based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant. Any further discussion on that? Okay. I make a motion that we find they've met their burden on this matter and that there's substantial material competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant. He didn't create the problem. All those finding they've met their burden on this, say aye.
I'll second it first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Motion, thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Schiller seconds. Any further discussion? All those finding they've met their burden on this, that the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or owner, say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? So it's unanimous, okay. The fourth and last factor, based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, the purpose, and the intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secure and substantial justice is achieved.
I think we need to, at that point, insert the conditional.
I got it. It's the last item. There are additional conditions ordered by the board.
Okay.
For that last one, do we need to specify the deck separate from the second story?
Oh, you're right, you're right. Let's get back to the third factor.
Are you back to public safety? Where are you?
You
Back
skipped
I'm
over
at factor
that.
number 3.
We forgot to do B and C.
Okay.
Let's start over on factor 3. Based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or owner as regards the A, second story addition, and I make a motion that we find they've met their burden, that the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or owner as regards the second story addition. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Starnes. Any further discussion? All those in favor of finding that they've met their burden on the second story addition, say aye. Aye. Any nay? So that one was unanimous, aye. Factor 4.
So do we say about?
Oh, I'm sorry, the decks.
Decks.
I am so sorry. D. Based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or owner as regards the 14-foot deck. Any further discussion on the 14-foot deck on this factor? I make a motion finding they've met their burden on this factor regarding the 14-foot deck. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schiller. All those in favor that they have met their burden on this factor regarding the 14-foot deck, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? So that was unanimous ayes on the 14-foot deck. The other deck. Based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or owner as regards the 23-foot, 9.5-inch long deck. Any further discussion on that 23-foot deck? I move that we find they've met their burden on this factor as regards the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schiller. Any further discussion? All those in favor of finding they've met their burden on this factor on the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nay? The vote on that is unanimous aye. The fourth and last factor, based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved as regards the second story addition. Any further discussion on this factor as regards the second story addition? Hearing no further discussion on that, I move that based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved as regards the second-story addition. Do I have a second for that
Second.
motion?
Second.
Seconded again by Mr. Schiller. Any further discussion? All those in favor of finding that they have met their burden on this factor as regards the second-story addition, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nay? It's unanimous, aye. Turning to the 14-foot deck. Based upon the evidence presented in the fact sheet above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved as regards the 14-foot deck. Any further discussion? I make that motion, the motion to find that they've met their burden on the 14-foot deck as regards this factor. Any further discussion? All those in favor of finding that they met their burden on this
I need
factor?
a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Rockamore has seconded my motion as regards the 14-foot deck. All those in favor of finding they have met their burden on this factor regarding the 14-foot deck, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nay?
Nay.
So we have 4 aye, 1 nay, which is Mr. Schiller. Okay. We're going to go to,
Same for the 23.
okay, do that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting tired. Regarding the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. Any further discussion on that deck, the 23-foot deck? I make the motion that based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment finds substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved as regards the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck. Do I have a second that they've met their burden? I make that motion, they've met their burden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Starnes. Any further discussion on the 23-foot deck? All those that find they have met their burden on this factor as regard the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck, say aye. Aye. Any nay on that deck?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay,
Can I go back and recant my on the first,
14th.
the 14th, the first, the house, it's yeah.
Yeah, let me finish on this. So we have 3 aye, we have 2 nay on the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck on the fourth factor, and you want to turn back to which one?
Well, we did, so we've done both decks now here, or we did the.
Yes, we've actually done all the factors for all
Well, let
3.
me ask, again, this is, if we're going to put a conditional use, we're obviously feeling that there's an issue for safety. So
And
can we approve it and then put a condition of safety, and yet then we're going to put a condition of safety in there, requirement for safety, to maintain safety? How can we, on the whole thing, whole project?
Well, that's taken care of by like
The building
inspections.
inspector.
Building inspector, make sure that things
It's
are
got to be
done.
done to code.
to
That's-
code.
No, I'm talking about the safety, like the emergency vehicles, things like that. If we're going to put a condition on
Well,
it,
articulate.
are we making it? I guess my question is, if we're making a condition that they do X, Y, and Z to maintain the open road,
Right.
do we, I guess I'm trying to figure out, how does this statement relate to that? If we say it doesn't, it does satisfy all the safety stuff, how can we then go and add a condition to it?
What condition do you want?
The condition about keeping it open, the one that you talked about.
We're about to do that. We just haven't.
I know, but what I'm saying is if we're saying it doesn't impact the safety, and we're gonna put a condition that does impact, they have to do this to maintain the safety. You know, are we saying, are we saying two things?
Well, there's safety and justice.
Are we safety on the building and the decks, and then we're gonna be safety on the street over here on another item? Are these different?
I think we found that,
I think they would be different.
safety, inconvenience to others, et cetera, is going to be no worse after this than it is now. The street is horrible now. It's not gonna be any worse because of this project. It's gonna be the same when this project's completed. We wanna try to keep the roadways navigable and passable during the process of this construction with the conditions.
So you're saying, you're talking about the outcome does not, what we're saying is the outcome does not impact.
Yeah, I don't see how the narrow street's gonna get any narrower.
No, that's fine. I just want to clarify that what we're saying is, we're talking about, ultimately, we're talking about outcomes, is not the whole project.
I think an example where the improvement would be a hazard to safety is if there was a large structure that obscured a view and you couldn't see oncoming traffic where you used to be able to. So that wouldn't secure safety. But then the question, the other part is justice, which relates to what is permitted by the statutes and what the setbacks are. So it's like it's a two-part.
That justice covers a lot. It would cover the harm to neighbors. It would cover breaking the law that you can't break. And unfortunately, they don't give us a really nice definition of justice. I'm throwing those out just by reading a lot of cases from the North Carolina Court of Appeals, but they see us falling under justice. But we're back to.
It seemed like similar to the first question where we voted no.
Yeah,
There's a similarity there.
okay. Yeah, that's,
Would unnecessary hardship result? That's the first factor. You want to go back to?
No.
Okay, all right. We're at the point where we need to see where we stand.
Mr.
as
Chairman.
far as what we're, go ahead.
Let's go back to number 4, in the 14-foot deck. The motion was made to find, and Lee voted, to second that.
yeah, that's gonna,
Then he votes against it, so I think you need to address that.
just reopen that, I think reopen that again.
On the fourth factor.
On the, for that deck, that specific one, the 14-foot deck. Because I can't second if I'm going to, can't, I vote, change my vote.
Okay, on factor 4, which says, based upon the evidence presented and the facts shown above, the Board of Adjustment, the motion was that we find substantial material and competent evidence exists to conclude that in this case, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secure and substantial justice is achieved. We took a vote on the second story addition, and we found they'd met their burden on that. It was unanimous. We took a vote on the 14-foot deck.
Can we reopen that?
And
Someone would like to change.
your vote on B, the 14-foot
Yes,
deck?
yes. We haven't concluded the whole section.
Well, let's see if, does any board member object to reopening the 14-foot deck on this factor and taking another vote? Any objections to that by anyone?
Objections.
And I think we should ask the applicant and the property owner, do you object if we go back and take another vote on factor 4 on the 14-foot deck?
I don't know the impact of opening it up, to be honest.
no objection on us reopening the vote on the 14-foot deck regarding factor 4. So the motion is to find that they've met their burden on factor 4, that the 14-foot deck, the requested variance for the 14-foot deck is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. I move that we find they have met their burden. Is there a second on the 14-foot deck?
Second.
Second by Ms. Murphy. Any further discussion? All those in favor of finding that the applicant has met their burden on the 14-foot deck, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nay?
Nay.
So we have 2 nay. Mr. Schiller and Dr. Rockamora, and 3 yay. So let's go back and find out where we stand as regard each one on each factor. The applicant on each factor, on each item, has to get at least 4 out of 5 votes finding they have met their burden. Any less than 4 votes, and you didn't win that one. And as we go through the 4, the applicant can lose a vote on each item in each factor, but you can't lose more than 2, or you haven't gotten there. Let's take it step by step. On conclusion 1, factor 1, the second story addition, got a unanimous vote. We have found the second story addition has succeeded. The applicant has succeeded on the second story addition. On the 14-foot long deck on factor 1, it was 3 yay, or aye, excuse me, and 2 nay. So the applicant has not met their burden on the 14-foot deck for factor 1. To get a variance, the applicant has to succeed on all 4 factors. As regards the 14-foot deck, we're going to talk about what happened in the second and the third and the 4th factor, but they have failed already on the 14-foot long deck, and they're not going to get a variance for that because they didn't get the required 4 votes out of 5. They only got 3. On the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck, and I'm still on factor 1, the vote was 3 aye and 2 nay. And again, they were required to get 4 out of 5, at least 4 out of 5, to succeed on getting a variance on winning that factor. And again, if the applicant loses on any one of the 4 factors, they're not going to get a variance. They have lost factor 1 on the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck, and so they're not going to get a variance for that deck. Let's continue. So far, they have succeeded. They're succeeding at this point on the addition. They have not succeeded, and they're out, so to speak, on the 14-foot and the 23-foot deck. On factor 2, we're talking about where the hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property. The vote there regarding the second story addition was unanimous in favor of the applicant. It was 5 out of 5. And so they have succeeded on factor 2. On the second story addition, they succeeded on factor 1. Now they have succeeded on factor 2. The 14-foot deck on factor 2, the vote was 3 aye, that they have met their burden, and 2 nay. And again, they did not, on the 14-foot deck on factor 2, they didn't get the required 4 votes, so they have failed on factor 2. They've already lost the possibility of a variance on the 14-foot deck because they lost factor 1, but they've also lost factor 2. The vote on factor 2 on the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck was 3 aye and 2 nays. So they did not get the required 4 votes for the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck on factor 2, so they're not going to get a variance on that deck. Continuing on, factor 3. Talking about the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or property owner. The vote on the second story addition was unanimous in favor of the applicant, that they met their burden. And that's the third factor they have. The applicant has won. And continuing on with factor 3, the vote on the 14-foot deck on factor 3 was unanimous, aye. They've already lost that 14-foot deck possibility for variance, so this aye vote's not going to help them, unfortunately. The 23-foot, 9.5-inch long deck, regarding factor 3, the vote was unanimous, aye, that they have met their burden. But again, they've already lost out on the deck because they lost factor 1 and 2 on that deck. Returning now to the final 4th factor, regarding whether the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulations such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. As regards the second story addition, the vote was unanimous, aye, in favor of the finding that they have met their burden. That's the 4th and last factor, so that would allow a variance with conditions, if any, to follow on the second story addition. The 14-foot deck vote on factor 4 was 3 aye and 2 nay. And the vote on the 23-foot, 9.5-inch deck was 3 aye and 2 nay. So continuing. I make a motion that we grant the requested variance for the second story addition with a mandatory condition attached to it, which reads, the Board of Adjustment makes the following mandatory conditions of the granting of this variance. And this mandatory condition, and these mandatory conditions last from the beginning of building and construction activity related to the 2 decks in the second story addition until.
You can take out
the
the
2
2
decks. Thank you. Related to the second story addition until the end of that activity and a successful permit of completion being issued by the Blowing Rock Town Building Inspector. The condition is that there is to be absolutely no parking of vehicles or placement of materials related in any way to the building and construction of this second story addition to the roadway, in the roadway of Dogwood Lane, from curb to curb and side to side of Dogwood Lane. This includes all the roadway of the Blowing Rock Street, Dogwood Lane, not just the roadway adjacent to the property at 442 Dogwood Lane. Vehicles related to that building and construction may stop and stand for brief periods of time, not to exceed 15 minutes, to load and unload materials and equipment. During such loading and unloading, the vehicle is not to be left unattended for any period of time. As a further condition, there must be a sign prominently displayed and visible in the front of the property at 442 Dogwood Lane, and the sign must be as follows. It must be 8 feet by 4 feet in size, standing erectly with the following wording boldly written on it and visible from the street. During construction here, the owner has agreed to not block or impede the Dogwood Lane roadway. Any problems with the roadway being blocked can be reported to the Blowing Rock Planning and Inspections Office, 828-295-5240. So I make a motion that we find the applicant, make a motion that we grant the applicant a variance as regards the second story addition. Allowing a 12-foot variance into the street setback.
South side, on the south side.
I was just gonna say 12-foot variance in the street setback. Do you think we need to?
I think you need to specify.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Dr. Rockamore suggests we note that the 12-foot variance is into the street setback on the south side.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. On the south side of the property. How about we include as proposed and shown in the staff report?
Yeah, sounds good.
So I've made a motion that we grant them the variance for the second story addition, allowing the 12-foot variance in the street setback on the south side of the property as proposed and shown in the staff report with the following mandatory condition. As follows, and as follows would be the condition I just related. That's my motion that we grant the
I
variance.
second the motion.
You want to label that like exhibit A or exhibit whatever?
It's going to go into the document,
Okay,
decision
okay,
document. That's where you'll find its home, and it'll go into the land records then. So I make the motion. Who was the second? Mr. Schiller was the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of granting the second story addition, the 12-foot variance with the mandatory condition as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nay? It's unanimous. All five say aye. This decision is effective upon filing with the clerk and after adoption by all members. I will type up. I will type it up. Touch base with the members participating here by email. They will proofread it, and when they have, once I have everyone's acknowledgement that it is true and correct, I'll sign it. It'll be filed with the clerk. And it'll become effective. I make the motion that the Board of Adjustment did adopt the above listed conclusions of law. And I need a second on that. Did we adopt all the conclusions of law? Second by Dr. Nakamura. And all those in favor that the Board of Adjustment adopt the above conclusions of law as just stated, say aye.
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 Any nay? It's unanimous. Aye. And so we're finished. Mr. Martelli, you got your second story edition, but you didn't get it out of the day.
Maybe you could make like a widow's walk, or a observation platform up on top.
Yeah, you have height, you have more height.
See if the ships come in.
I make a motion, we conclude this meeting of the Rolling Rock Board of Adjustment. Second?
Or you can stay.
Was that a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schiller. All in favor of adjourning? Aye, it's unanimous. Good evening.